Hey guys, I hope you are all doing well. I hope you're rested up, rejuvenated from a week during spring break. Albeit that it's probably not the spring break you envisioned. None of us probably envisioned it to be this way, but here we are. Tomorrow we'll be having a Zoom call at 4 o'clock, just going over the details of the class going on. I'll just kind of give you a quick little shot here. Class is going to go on for us like normal. Again, I don't, they said May 15th we're coming back. The seniors are done. Here's what I do know. Um, we're going to keep going like normal. That's one thing that's within our control. I think it's good for us to keep going on like normal. The assignments will stay about the same, probably 2 to 3, possibly 4 per week. And they're instituting the Flex Fridays, so there's going to be no classes or anything to be given on Fridays unless you're making up work. We did that yesterday, Monday was a Flex Friday day, but that was primarily for teachers to get their grades turned in for Q3. We still do not know anything about the Q4 grades, if it's going to be a letter grade or if it's going to be a pass fail. Not exactly sure. Still waiting to hear. That's statewide. That's across the board. I know my wife is wanting answers as well too, but here we are. So for the sake of what we're doing, we're just going to keep moving right along. Since we did have our flex, quote unquote, Friday yesterday on Monday, Friday will be a teach day. There's going to be a test given on Friday on the material that we've covered up until this point. On Thursday, take that back, on Wednesday, I will post um, a review guide just going through the questions from the quiz and as well as some new ones will be put up on there. But there will be a review guide. If you look at the review guide, make sure you understand the review guide, then there should be no problem whatsoever in you taking that test and making a good grade. And we'll finish it out. So this one, PowerPoint today and little slide here, is the last little bit of our unit before we get into Civil War. So here it is: Nativism in Antebellum America. We have talked about this Antebellum period, the age of Jackson, the age of the common man, right, where people are garnering more rights. We also talk about this antebellum or the age of reform taking place, and that has goes hand in hand with the age of Jackson, and people garnering more and more rights. Right, but there is one little thing that is not talked about. We're going to hit it right here, and that is nativism or an immense love for one's country, quote unquote. And you can see from this scene right here in this background, this comes from the movie Gangs of New York. Native Americans beware of foreign influence. All right, so let's get started. From Washington's farewell address: against the insidious wiles of foreign influence, the jealousy of a free people ought to be constantly awake. And so, what he's saying here: against the insidious wiles of foreign influence, the jealousy of a free people ought to be constantly awake. Right? Meaning that the jealousy of people who are free ought to be constantly awake. We should not suppress the jealousies of others people against other people because that's freedom. So we should not stop or stifle anyone who dislikes or does not approve of someone else's thought process or maybe their religious views. We must keep it open and we must allow for it to be open because, well, free people ought to be constantly awake. And native, you see these signs all the time. This is just one that I Google searched and came up with, but you see it a lot, even with North Carolina. It's native or home with the state in there. If you can see by this one, they put the palmetto state, the palmetto tree there with the moon, the flag of South Carolina. They put it as the eye right there, native. And there's a message here. Basically, put people want to let other people know, hey, I'm a resident of this state. I'm a native born person. I'm from here. I didn't immigrate here. I didn't move here for whatever reason. I am here. And in other words, it's like Yankee go home, which is interesting because I'm from South Dakota. All right. I came here to North Carolina when I was in the seventh grade. Okay. When I got here, South Dakota wasn't even a state during um, the Civil War. No one fought in it from South Dakota because, again, it wasn't a state. But one thing I did witness was a lot of the time, and hear quite a bit, was people saying, "Hey, Yankee, go home." And I was always confused because I was not a Yankee. My ancestors, well, on one side of my family, weren't even here at that point in time. But they say that a lot, Northerners coming down south and Yankee go home. Right? And when we take this back even further than the antebellum period, America was founded on Protestant roots. Right? A majority of Americans are Protestant as of 2007 from these statistics right here from the Pew Forum. But a good chunk of Americans are Protestant. Our country was founded on Protestant ideals and not Catholic ideals from the Protestant Reformation. However, Catholics are the largest religious group worldwide. Right? Throughout the world, there are more Catholics than any other Christian denomination that's out there. And so you can kind of see the size and the growth of the U.S. Catholic population from 1776 to 2010. If you look here in 1776, there was only about 45,000 Catholics in America at that point, and they resided primarily in Baltimore or in Maryland. Again, the colony itself was given to Lord Baltimore as a Catholic safety haven for them to reside in. Now, by 1850, 10 years before the start of the Civil War, there's 1.2 million Catholics that are living in America. So from 1776 to 1850, there was a huge explosion of immigration taking place. And we in history like to just call this old immigration. And old immigration primarily comes from two areas. It comes from Germany and it comes from Ireland. A third of the immigrants that came in uh, during the antebellum period was Irish, right, from Ireland. And half of those immigrants came, of that one third, half of it came during the 1840s. So it was a huge swath of people all at one point in time coming to America, right? And why were the Irish coming to America during the 1840s? Was because of famine. The Irish potato famine took place in Ireland and there was no food. So Irish people flocked to America on the docks in a very quick, timely fashion. Now, German Americans, German is the most common nation of origin identified by Americans today. If you look right here, as the 2000 census result coming back was German, people identify as 15.2%, right, identify as being German. Right? And then you can see the next subgroup right below it is Irish. Right? So most people are Irish American or Irish German, Irish English, English itself. But a good chunk of people identify as German. Now, what's interesting to note, and of course, this is from 1872, but where did the German people go to and move to when they came to America? And where did the Irish people go to and move to? Now, you can see this density population right here of where German people went to. Yeah, you had your good little chunk right there, a pretty dense population in the New York City, Philadelphia area. Right? But most Germans, when they came to America, they resided out in the old Northwest Territory or the West, up here in Wisconsin, Michigan, right here in Illinois, Iowa, present day Minnesota. And if you look at where the Irish Americans went to, yes, you had a pretty good population group right here in the Chicago, Illinois area, the Cleveland and Pittsburgh areas, but the vast majority of Irish Americans that came to America resided right up here in the New England region and in New York. So New York City, right, Boston, Massachusetts, and they condensed themselves. And so one thing about the German Americans when they came over here was they spread out. I mean, look at that map and just kind of look at the spread. Your very populated, dense areas of German Americans, of course, right here in New York City, and also look around here, right? Buffalo, New York, right? Pittsburgh or Rochester, PA, my bad. Cleveland, Ohio, right in there, right? Also up in here, Toledo, okay? Um, Also up in here into Detroit, okay? Also right up in here, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, all right? Minnesota, right around here in the Iowa and Illinois range, right there on the Mississippi River, right, St. Louis, right, as well. They spread themselves out, whereas if you look at the Irish, it is very, very dense, right up through here, and then kind of spread out and very few and far between here. And so that kind of creates problems on its own sense. The fact that the German Americans spread out, they couldn't get pushed into a ridicule group, whereas most, right, Irish condense themselves into one place. Now, the other thing to go with this too is that the Germans that were coming over here are Protestant, and of course, the Irish that are coming over here are Catholic. And so, nativism basically is established citizens versus recent immigrants. All right, and so you can see by this flag here, Native Americans beware of foreign influence. Right now, great movie if you with all this time off, if you and your family would like to watch it. It's got Leonardo DiCaprio, Daniel Day-Lewis, one of my favorite actors of all time. This movie called Gangs of New York, which does a really, really good job of detailing uh, kind of how New York was as far as immigrants, Irish versus Catholic versus Americans, quote on Native Americans, quote unquote. And so this whole movie was put up about the gangs that were formed in New York about nativism. And the whole part of this nativist was for political power. Why did a nativist movement start? Why did the issue over what does it mean to be an American and exactly race and creed and gender and religion? What does it all have to do with? Well, at this point in time, it was about political power. Um, and so, what was very fearful of it was that certain politicians would use these Irish people coming into America as votes, and so therefore could keep them in power. And where Native Americans who were not Irish were very fearful of the fact that they could get ousted of political power. And that you can see here by this political cartoon. You got Irish whiskey and German lager beer, that they're running a show, that they're running amok. They fight, they're drinkers, they're hard drinkers, they cuss, and they just don't follow the traditional rules of quote unquote what America was, even though pretty much America was identical, but it was fear. I think that's interesting to be noted because fear is one of the driving causes of why we tend not to like a certain group of people. It's fear that of the unknown, and at this point in time, the quote unquote Native Americans were fearful that if the Irish came and you gave them rights, and if the Irish came and you allowed them full out, that the political power would switch away from them, right, from the quote unquote Native Americans to the Irish in the ballot box. And so what starts happening to start with is just like these ads here, no Irish need apply, like grocery cart and harness for um, a person in good order, and one chestnut horse, 8 years old, excellent saddle horse, can be ridden by a lady. Also, young man wanted from 16 to 18 years of age, be able to, not exactly sure it says, but here's the big one. No Irish need apply for this job. So basically, in looking for a grocery cart handler, um, no Irish need apply. And this was the political cartoon shown here from Puck Magazine. You can see Uncle Sam, Lady Liberty at nighttime right here. And you got the Irishman making a big old stink, the Englishman looking at the Irishman, the Germans just dead asleep, the Russian, the African Americans, right? And all this noise and mockery from every one of the outside groups coming into America. And so what happens is, again, for that political power reason, um, we see the birth of a brand new political party, a third party that pops out. And they are simply known as the Native American Republican Party, otherwise known as the Know Nothing Party. Now, again, if you look at this, the Native American Republican Association, right? And beware of foreign influence. This certifies that a person is a member. This was a certificate membership that you are a part of the association. But is there a problem in Scripture of ousting certain groups of people? Just as you know, the Jewish people, the Israelis, the Israelites were ousted themselves from their homeland. Right? And so in 1844, there was one of our first ever Nativist riots that took place. An anti-Catholic violence took place in the city of Brotherly Love when a mob set St. Augustine's Catholic Church on fire. Now, again, that's not really religious or Christian like of a group of people to burn another Christian denomination's church, right? And this was a cartoon in 1876 from a new wave of immigration that takes place that you'll learn about in American 2. But you can see here again the people praying and scared, right? As the Pope, the Catholic Pope, is coming, right? He's coming for coming from the Vatican and coming to, right, America's shores, right, to take over. And you can also see the American flag flipped upside down. Anarchy has taken place by allowing this to happen. And so what happens during the antebellum period, like I said, was the American Republican Party, not the Republican Party that you know about, but not the Democrats and not the present day Republicans. The American Republican Party is formed, aka they're known as the Know Nothings. Why? Because if you ask someone what their stance was, they would reply back with, I know nothing. They were against Catholics and they were against immigration. Right? And they even ran a president, Millard Fillmore, for president on the ticket, right? Now, where were the Know Nothings the most popular at? Now, again, if you see here, Millard Fillmore, by representation as their presidential nominee, you can see by county in 1856 where he was incredibly popular at. Here in North Carolina, Virginia, all right, Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri, along this Mississippi Beltway right here, okay, in the deep South, incredibly popular, and even out in California was he incredibly popular. Not so much here in Michigan, not so much in Ohio, parts of Illinois, Wisconsin, parts of Minnesota, Iowa, and in the New England region, kind of popular there in New York. But this is where the Know Nothings were incredibly powerful at. Now, if you look where the actual election took place, and this is the full election with James Buchanan, James C. Fremont, and Millard Fillmore. You can see exactly who took what where. Now, in those areas that were not densely populated, of course, they went to James Buchanan, and then you had the Democrat, and then you had the Republican, who would be technically the Republican in 1856, was John C. Fremont, and then the Know Nothing Party, Millard Fillmore. You can see yellow. Where were the Know Nothings the most popular at? Right, Missouri, Kentucky, North Carolina, right, Georgia, along this Mississippi Riverway right here. Okay, and of course, because of the fiasco between Fremont and the Abolition Party and the bog that they got stuck in with the antebellum reform movements, Fremont got stuck in that. Fillmore got stuck, right, with the idea of again the Know Nothing Party. This allowed for James Buchanan to hop freely. The American Buck Hunt, the Great American Buck Hunt, as this political cartoon says of 1856, this allows for James Buchanan, a do nothing, to get into the White House in 1856. You can see it there. Fremont, the Republican, the Whig, the American Know Nothing or American Know Nothing Republican Party, Fremont or Fillmore, and the Democrat James Buchanan, and he promises himself into the White House. Citizen Know Nothing, the nativist ideal that you keep quiet. However, that's not so much the case. Um, on December 8th, 2010, Baltimore Orioles slugger sounded off that Obama does not represent America. A professional athlete sounds off. This goes against that citizen know nothing, that they don't say anything back then. Contemporary nativism looks just like this. And his name was Luke Scott, and he slammed Barack Obama as being a step with American values and challenged the president's claim to United States citizenship. Right. And then here's where it gets funny. He goes, by comparison, Scott offered props to the values that he said conservative singer activist Ted Nugent embodies. I look at Ted Nugent, and he's an American. He has core beliefs of what it means to be an American in his heart. He lives by those beliefs and principles. It is the same beliefs that our forefathers who fought for our country have. It'd be real interested in meeting him one day. This is Ted Nugent. Yeah.